All right, so over the past 3 years, I've convinced journalists from Forbes, Entrepreneur Inc., and many other well known magazines and online publications to write about my clients. And I'm really here to just show you how you can do this yourself in really any publication you want. And we've also convinced producers from CNN, Fox Business, ABC, and a myriad of other news podcasts to interview our clients as well. So this is just step by step everything we use and continue to have used for our clients and have been refined over the past 2 or 3 years or so. The first step that we take after signing up a client is just to conduct an interview over Google Meet. Really simple, I know, but the end goal is just to understand why a journalist would even want to write about them in the first place and just to know more about them and their story than even their mother does, right? During this interview, we often go into sensitive information. We don't necessarily need to use this when we're pitching, but it helps to know from a perspective of how we want to think when we're telling your story, right? Obviously, we use Google Meet's transcription recording tools. There are a few other ones like Otter AI and Fathom as well. Because the one thing I've noticed is that if you're typing out what someone's saying, you cannot focus on the actual portion of the interview. And how I don't want to indirectly misquote someone off of an interview too. So we just take the step of recording and transcribing all our interviews. So I myself, when I'm interviewing, I can just focus on taking each question a level deeper just to understand someone's perspective, why they think that way, why it's important to their industry, right? And obviously, we do some account management questions. Like, we want to go over their goals. We want to go over some things like this, like who's going to be your main person of contact, who will serve as the company spokesperson. This is important because if a journalist needs to know something right away, I need to know who to contact. I can't have it be forwarded to 20 different people. You just need to know this, right? And from there, we need to know, are they media trained? Can we pitch an interview with a journalist, or are we just going to have to give quotes, right? Or are we going to have to media train them ourselves? And this applies more for e commerce type stores, but can we send off products for them to review, right? Because if they can do a product review, that's an easy one as well. From there, we want to go into some brand questions, right? We want to figure out who is the company? What do you guys want to be associated with? What do you guys not want to be associated with? What should we avoid? What do you guys do? What do you guys not do? And same thing, what should we avoid? And same, we want to know what's happening within the company, right? Is the company expanding? Are you guys buying up new locations? Any company announcements, mergers, things like that? We need to be seen as the people that are an extension of the marketing team. So we need to know everything that's happening, right? And the other thing we need to know, are there any red flags, lawsuits, or anything like that that we need to get ahead of, or anything that could be a potential for us to screw over the client's reputation or your reputation down the line as well. And a lot of this is personal. Hell, we've linked people to crazy upbringings, right? People always love seeing rag to riches stories. They love seeing people do interesting things on social media. Hell, they even love seeing you being able to link other important people to what you've done with your mission as well. So once we've figured out what the actual story angles are, we then want to go into what are the actual story goals. Like, for example, is your immediate goal to get into a tier one publication? Is it to be credible? Is it brand awareness? Any specific media outlets? And are you looking to be interviewed? Are you looking just for features? Are you looking to be a contributor, guest appearances, that kind of thing as well? We also need to dive into current activities, aka what's happening within the business, what sets you apart, competitors, how you set yourselves apart, things like that. Because PR does play a huge part, especially from a business to business or business to consumer perspective in buying decisions, right? And if we can set you guys as the guy in your specific space, great. But what's easier and what's more common is if we look at brand positioning, something where we're setting you as the guy within, let's just say, the roofing space, right? The premium roofer, right? The fastest roofer, right? The most reliable roofer, right? Those are all three unique positions that work really well. And if we can get you on one of those and have your ideal audience resonate with that, that's going to do the best, right? And then we also need to know previous media exposure because that does help. Journalists need to see that you are credible when you're pitching them. And then audience, who's your audience? Because we need to make sure there is an overlap with the journalist audience too. We always need pictures, videos, things like that. If we can have these right away, that's going to be awesome. And then there are some sensitive topics that we touch on as well. And then everything from that, once we're done our interview, it is building up a list to determine who we're going to pitch in the first place, right? Now, the most important thing to note is if I'm pitching a tech story to an environmentalist journalist, they're not really going to care for the most part. So we have to make sure when we're building our list that we can make every single story relevant to that specific journalist, right? And one thing to note, if you're pitching these journalists time in, time out, they may end up blocking you if they hate your story or they're not relevant, right? This because the only way to build relationships with journalists is in person or providing them what they're looking for with their stories, right? If you're giving good content, they're going to hit you up because they know that you're going to deliver on something they need, right? So this is why, for the most part, we only really need to grab 60 people per month, right? Obviously, in some cases, we grab way more. Sometimes it's way less, right? But for the most part, we want to make sure that we're doing a small amount of personalized pitches per day. And what we need to grab is we just need their email, their name, publication. Sometimes they'll be freelance writers. Basically, a freelance writer just means that they work for numerous publications. Their designation, are they a tech editor? Are they a journalist? What are they? Any social media, and then relevant articles that are relevant to what our client is speaking on, right? And how I do this before I go into it is I just come up with 20 or so keywords that we could base the articles on. And you can also use ChatGPT to do this as well. How you do this is you use this prompt, throw it in there, filter out the ones that suck, right? Like we do location specific, we do industry specific, hell, we even do personal specific too. And then what we do there is we search for these keywords on Muckrack. Muckrack is a tool to grab journalist emails, and we use that to build out our list. And we want to vet the stories too. If we can come up with the best high quality stories, then we're off to the races, right? Once your list has been pulled, it's relatively simple from there. You just want to verify the emails, make sure they're all correct. Generally, these are up to date, so they should be fine, but throw it in a tool like ClearOut just to make sure. Download the valid emails, throw them in your campaign, you're good to go. And now, the other reason why we actually build lists out so precisely is just personalization, right? Like this says, if you're able to say, hey, Jim, loved your last story on tech, this story on AI tech could be of interest, that's going to be way more helpful to someone than someone just saying, hey, this story on AI tech could be of interest, right? And now I just want to digress into how to create high quality pitches because our goal is just to stand out from the hundreds or dozens of emails that journalists get every single day. And the way that we do this is by creating subject lines, hooks, and angles, right? We want to test out what's working and what isn't working. And every month we'll just analyze what worked, what didn't work, what we should scrap, what we should double down on, right? And obviously, the shorter the better for emails. But what journalists want is they want the who, what, where, when, why, how of your story, important details, and other relevant info as well, effectively in this order too. So we want to make sure that they open the email with an engaging subject line, have a reason to want to feature it, and obviously that they understand that it is a pitch. Here are just some questions that I think of when I'm creating pitches just to determine whether or not it's even good or not. First thing you want to look at is impact. Does this story actually impact a large amount of people or an audience significantly? This is easily done through numbers and statistics. And here's just a couple of examples. You could say CDC announced immunity of 4 million office workers are compromised, 68% more year over year between January and March. You can do proximity, right? If you're pitching Hollywood, you're going to want to be pitching the Hollywood area publications because those are relevant, right? And same thing, if a relevant news story is happening, pitch the local publications. And then timeliness too, right? This is a pretty easy one to explain, but if a story's trending and relevant, that's rather easy to jump on. For example, when Threads came out, it was relatively easy to pitch our clients to journalists talking about Threads, giving their input and showcasing how them as a larger creator, they moved from Twitter or Instagram over to Threads and were able to keep large traction in what their thoughts were on the platform. And then prominence too. Journalists are going to want to feature people who are already famous. So if you can link it to famous people or organizations, great. If your client's already famous, same thing, great. Next one is just conflict. Is there anything as far as controversy or conflict that actually people care about? Next one is human emotion. You tend to see this a lot just on local news stories, like, oh my goodness, you get the stories of puppies or kids saved from house fire or something like that. You can apply a human interest angle to these, but I tend to use this the least, but it can work really well to frame a potentially boring or niche story angle to a larger audience, right? And the next one, novelty. Is your story unique enough to stand out, right? Like basically, if something like AI is getting covered all the time, how do you set yourself apart from the other AI stories out there? And then how we actually write these is for the hook section. We just really just want to lead with something newsworthy that makes them want to hear more, how it can benefit their readers. And we just make sure that we're answering the 5 W's. Step by step, what we have is narrow down what you have, categorize your info into the below categories, and mix the components that are the most engaging into your hook, right? Basically creating clickbait, pretty easy. We can also include quotes, areas your representatives can provide expert insights on, explanation on why the hook is relevant, an intro to the person and their thoughts on the topic, and experience and relevance of the person, just depending on how the pitch is worded. And the last thing we want to do is we just want to put in a call to action. I either do interview or interest. It really just depends on how high level the person is. If we're doing an interview, it's literally just, would you be interested in interviewing Jim, right? Or let me know if you'd be interested in speaking with Jim, or if there are any other related stories you're working on that could be of interest, or something like that. If it's an interest story, you just do, would this story angle be of interest? Let me know if this is of interest. Would you be interested in using some of these stats in an upcoming article? And then that's really how we pitch from start to finish. There's a few more technical things like sending out the emails, replying to people, how to read the testings, but what's awesome about PR is you can go through this plug and play and get yourself featured in like 2 days or something like that of pitching. Our fastest result was 3 hours after onboarding. And that's because we knew a contact that wanted that story anyways. And what's awesome is that with pitching, you're in control of how you boost your credibility and exposure, right? But the one thing I will note is that copy paste, it really only works to an extent. You can come up with your own results and start getting the exact same results without your hand being held here. And you're going to do a lot better once you can understand why certain angles work and why you're getting results versus just copy and pasting. So you actually never have to understand where your next lead's coming from. So if you're a business owner and you're looking for more backlinks or you want to get featured on high level publications, we can show you how to get top tier media in the next 30 days with Spit Solutions. But in the meantime, I hope this is valuable. Hope you got a lot out of this. If you have any questions, comment below or feel free to shoot the contact link in the DMs below.